Today, Bitcoin briefly breaks through the $35,000 level, PayPal says it faces an SEC subpoena over its USD stablecoin, and crypto-focused attorney Zack Shapiro provides insight into the trial of SBF as jury deliberations are underway. Welcome to CNBC's Crypto World. I'm Talia Kaplan. Crypto prices mixed this morning, with Bitcoin trading higher compared to yesterday, but dipped slightly after breaking through the $35,000 mark. That came after the Fed's decision yesterday to hold rates steady. Ether also traded higher today as ProShares said it's rolling out the first ETH futures ETF that allows investors to bet against the price of the cryptocurrency. Solana, however, fell more than 1% this morning, trading at more than $40. Okay, let's talk about the top stories. PayPal revealed that it received a subpoena from the SEC regarding its dollar-backed stablecoin. Now, this comes one day after we told you the firm registered with the UK's Financial Conduct Authority as a crypto service provider. The global payments giant said in a filing with the SEC that it's cooperating with the agency's requests of the production documents, but didn't give any further details. PayPal launched its dollar-backed stablecoin in August to U.S. customers. It became available on Venmo about a month later. Next, the DOJ just charged executives of a crypto company for allegedly misappropriating millions of dollars of investor funds to buy things like luxury cars and real estate. According to the indictment unsealed yesterday, SafeMoon's founder and two top executives have been charged with running the alleged fraud. The government claims that the defendants lied to investors concerning whether the firm's use of locked liquidity was not accessible to them. Prosecutors allege that as SafeMoon's market cap grew to more than $8 billion, the three execs fraudulently diverted and misappropriated millions of dollars worth of what was supposed to be locked SafeMoon liquidity for their own personal benefit. Now, the SEC filed related civil charges against the three executives and charges related to the company's alleged unregistered sale of the SafeMoon token. Last, let's check in on the trial of Sam Bankman-Fried. Today we heard the last of the closing arguments from both sides. The defense made its case that the government depicted SBF as a villain and argued prosecutors didn't show that he acted with criminal intent. SBF's legal team also addressed his tendency to talk publicly, saying he would talk to just about everyone and that it was messy, but not a crime. The defense pointed a finger at co-conspirators Caroline Ellison, Nishad Singh, and Gary Wong, claiming that if they truly believed something nefarious was happening, they could have resigned, left the Bahamas, or alerted authorities. Ultimately, the defense's main argument was this: FTX was the victim of a poor system, weak risk management, and bad business decisions, but those are not crimes. The prosecutors, though, got one more chance to refute those claims, saying that the lack of risk management was a strategy, not a defense. They told the jury not to fall for it. In the midst of closing arguments, SBF got emotional and was holding back tears. So now, the jury is kicking off deliberations considering each of the 7 charges. Those include wire fraud and conspiracy to commit money laundering. The jury could remain in deliberations until 8:15 Eastern tonight. There's no way to know how quickly they'll reach a decision, and with no court on Friday, we could see deliberations continue into next week. Make sure you stay up to date on the latest in the trial over at CNBC.com. All right, for our main story, I spoke with crypto-focused attorney Zack Shapiro for insight into the trial of Sam Bankman-Fried as jury deliberations are now underway. He weighs in on the explosive testimony during the trial, the mountain of evidence, and the impact both factors will have on the jury as they weigh the case. Closing arguments in the trial of SBF kicked off yesterday. That's when prosecutors reminded the jurors of the mountain of evidence provided by key witnesses. Assistant U.S. Attorney Nicholas Roos said that the main thing the jury has to decide is whether SBF knew that taking money was wrong. He told the jury that Bankman-Fried, quote, schemed and lied to get money, which he spent. Meantime, SBF's lawyers accused the government of portraying him as a, quote, monster. The defense argued that SBF acted in good faith and that bad risk management is not a crime. They stressed that the case is not a movie and that SBF is not a villain. What do you think about the statements made during closing arguments, and how could they sway the jury?
Sure. So I think it's not surprising, the themes that we saw in closing statements, because from the beginning, this trial has all been about Sam's mental state, right? Did he intend to do something wrong? ultimately, this is a fraud trial. And one of the elements of fraud is that you had to intend to mislead someone for your own benefit and to their detriment here. And so the government story is that Sam lied to a bunch of different people. He lied to investors whose funds he misappropriated. Lied to people who invested in FTX, the equity, about whether the company was profitable. He misled customers by taking their funds against his own terms of service. And Sam's defense is the opposite, is that he acted in good faith, right? He made mistakes. He was a young and inexperienced entrepreneur. He had bad risk management, but that he did not intend to defraud anyone, be those FTX customers or investors in the company. And so a lot of the evidence so far has been about establishing what did Sam know, when did he know it, and did he act with the knowledge or the intent to mislead people.
Now, during the trial, we heard from former FTX and Alameda executives, including Caroline Ellison. When she took the stand, she said that she did, in fact, commit financial crimes when running Alameda, adding that SBF directed her to commit those crimes. She also said that she, alongside other executives, thought of ways to make balance sheets look better. So is testimony like that the most important factor for the jury as they head into deliberations?
Yeah, I think there are two sort of key parts of what the jury will be looking at. There were expert witnesses in this case who opined on accounting methods, on the cryptocurrency markets, who laid some background. I don't think that's going to be what's important. I think the two things the jury is likely to be focused on is first, the direct testimony by the government witnesses, which were Sam's co-founders, Caroline, Gary Wang, and Nishad. And they all said that Sam Bankman-Fried knew what he was doing, that he directed FTX funds to be used by Alameda. And I think that's going to be fairly damning evidence for Sam Bankman-Fried, whose main defenses are that, there was a wall between FTX and Alameda. He didn't know it was happening at Alameda. He didn't intend to defraud customers, and he didn't knowingly mislead anyone. I think the other big factor here is going to be Sam's own testimony, both the direct testimony, where he made a lot of claims about what he did or did not know, and then the, at least in my view, very damaging cross-examination by Assistant U.S. Attorney Danielle Sassoon, who seemingly caught Sam in a number of contradictions and showed that there's pretty good evidence that he knew what he was doing when he sent billions of dollars of FTX customer funds to Alameda, which then more or less gambled them away.
Expanding on that, SBF testified that he relied on the advice of the firm's in-house and outside counsel to make business decisions, including making loans to himself and deleting signal messages. What do you make of his argument that the attorneys were mostly responsible for the problems at the companies he founded?
Yeah, this was sort of a bizarre defense the whole time. So there is a classic defense in criminal cases called advice of counsel. When you use an actual advice of counsel defense, what you say is, I told my attorney before I took some act what I was going to do. I gave them all of the relevant facts. They opined and said this was legal. And then I followed their advice. And therefore, that goes to my mind state as to whether I committed a crime or not. When you make that defense, the downside is that you have to waive attorney-client privilege, and the government can introduce into evidence all sorts of stuff that would otherwise not be available for the jury to see because of attorney-client privilege. That's not what Sam was doing here. He was doing this sort of hybrid, halfway, presence of counsel rather than advice of counsel defense. And that's one of the two arguments Sam made, other than this sort of separation between FTX and Alameda. I don't think that that's going to be very persuasive to the jury, given that the lawyers almost certainly didn't know all of what was going on. And although they might have drafted some of the contracts that Sam used to use FTX funds at Alameda, they didn't know all of the context. They didn't know, that funds were being misappropriated. And so I just don't think at the end of the day, that's going to be a super powerful defense.
I spoke with a former federal prosecutor yesterday and asked about the apparent strategy from SBF to respond to prosecutors' questioning with, I don't recall, more than 100 times. I'm curious to get your take on that tactic. How could that impact his case and his credibility with the jurors?
Yeah, I think Sam was between a rock and a hard place here, right? He had very capable prosecutors cross-examining him. If they're able to pin him down on certain statements, that would be on the record for juries to look at while they're deliberating in the jury room. And that could be incredibly damaging to Sam. I think saying, I don't recall again and again may not sound credible. That might hurt his credibility with the jury, and that might hurt him. But if you're his lawyers, you have to balance that against the risk of making concrete statements that he himself would have contradicted elsewhere within the jury's earshot.
That makes sense. Now, I spoke with you just as the trial of Bankman-Fried was kicking off, but now that it has been a few weeks and it's coming to a close, did anything stand out to you during the trial?
Yeah, I think one of the things that stood out was how emotional this was for a lot of the parties here. I think Caroline Ellison's testimony was very powerful. The ways that she seems to have felt betrayed by Sam. There was a lot of their personal relationship, unfortunately, that was aired as part of this ordeal. And then even Sam's own testimony, right? I think at the end of the trial, during closing statements, he was looking quite emotional. And in terms of the themes of the trial, in terms of the likely outcome, I think much remains the same from when we first spoke at the outset of the trial. But what surprised me was how human this was, right? For a story about cryptocurrency and numbers and accounting. This is also very much a story about people and betrayal and personal relationships.
Before I let you go quickly, how long do you expect jury deliberations will last in this case, given the mountain of evidence and that testimony from those in SBF's inner circle?
It's hard to say, although I think one thing about jury deliberations is it will be a sign about the outcome of this case, how quickly the jury comes back. I think if we get a very quick verdict, that's probably bad news for Sam, right? I think that is likely a sign that whatever else the jurors saw, they saw a lot of evidence that he did commit fraud. If we, on the other hand, have a really long, weeks and weeks long jury deliberation, that might be a sign that there is one of the jurors who is not persuaded, and we might be more likely to have something like a hung jury, and that would probably be good news for Sam. So I think anywhere between days and weeks is likely, and the more it is like days, probably the better for the prosecution. The more it is like weeks or longer, the better for the defense.
Okay, one last thing before we go. MicroStrategy's Michael Saylor was on Squawk on the Street this morning, where he weighed in on the potential of an approval of a spot Bitcoin ETF and why he thinks investing in his company could be a good alternative.
It's going to accelerate adoption, and it's also going to accelerate institutional awareness and education efforts of Wall Street to teach the 99% of the investors that don't know about Bitcoin what it's all about. MicroStrategy is a differentiated offering. I think spot Bitcoin ETF is a great thing for investors, but we don't charge a fee. We use intelligent leverage, and we can generate a tax-deferred Bitcoin premium for our investors.
Okay, that's all for Crypto World today, but we'll be back again tomorrow, and we'll see you then.